我叫茱莉亚，中文名字叫葛瑞琳。我今天主要会讲英文。So mostly for this class today, I will speak English, and this is to give everyone an English listening test. 英语听力那个考试或者练习。So first, I'll say a little bit about my own background and why I would be interested in this topic. Okay, so I'm from Boston, I'm from America, and play the violin. My undergrad I got from Harvard University, and right now I'm studying for my doctorate at Juilliard. My mother language is English, obviously, but I'm very interested in Chinese. 特别喜欢中国文化和学汉语这个领域。So today I'm really happy to talk about the influence that my musical studies have had on my language studies and the relationships, the wonderful secret relationships between language and music that we can find if we dig a little bit deeper under the surface. First, I want to just tell everyone about a little 现象，就是我意识到了学中文的时候。So a little phenomenon that I noticed when I was learning Chinese is that there were mostly two groups of students, American students learning Chinese. One group, their listening and speaking was really good, but maybe their reading and their writing was not as strong. So mostly the students in the former group who excelled at speaking and listening, they had some sort of a musical background or music studies or listening to a lot of music or a talent for music, a good ear. And so this really got me curious about the relationship between music and language and how learning music can help you learn a foreign language, or even the reverse, how learning a foreign language can help your music. So, yeah, so I think 现在有很多同学想学英语，对吗？然后我推荐就是学音乐，可以对你的英语学习有所帮助。If you are learning English right now, then I would recommend that you try incorporating some music studies because this will improve your ear and it will improve your sensitivity and your ability to pick up other languages. Okay. So today's class, I'm going to talk mostly about the following things. First, I'm going to 简单地说, broadly introduce interactions between music and language, and just give a few examples that I want to share with everyone. Then I'm going to talk about pitch in English and pitch in Chinese, and the different role that's played by pitch in these two languages. And this will also talk about the closer relationship between Chinese and between Chinese musical and linguistic pitch in Chinese music, 特别是中国当代音乐. And then we'll use this sensitivity, this point of view, to look closer at a specific genre of music, which is 中国当代音乐, Chinese contemporary music. And I'm excited to look closer at one of my favorite pieces, 一首小提琴独奏，陈寅写的回忆, Memory, okay? And then at the very end, I'll perform this piece for everyone. So first talking about music and language relationships and looking at some really interesting examples. The first thing I want to talk about is Western opera. So if you've learned a little bit of music history, then you probably know that Western opera started in Italy. And originally it was completely following the rhythms and the cadences and the melodies of the Italian language. And it was very influenced by this, okay, especially in the recitative style. After opera was transplanted to other places, France, Germany, and so on, we started to see some really interesting changes in the types of rhythms, the types of melodies used, and all of this has very deep connections with the language that was used to set music. So if you're interested in comparing some of these, I've listed some composers here. 大家可以去听一下，就是那个意大利语的歌剧，包括 Jacopo Peri and Claudio Monteverdi. 法语歌剧包括 Jean-Baptiste Lully and Rameau also. And for 德语歌剧，这个 German opera, there's a little bit shorter tradition of it, at least when it originally started. A lot of people stayed writing in Italian. Yeah, but anyway, if you want to listen to 德语歌剧，你可以去听那个 Reinhard Kaiser oder Wolfgang Mozart's his German operas. He has German operas and Italian operas. Okay, so 大家可以去听一下，然后做一个比例，就是比一比。Do a comparison. What differences can you hear between these different operatic styles? Another example that I wanted to share with everyone was the concept of music as language during the Baroque period. 巴洛克这段时间，音乐就是算是一种语言。So all the composers in that time had a very unified language, a unified set of tools from which to draw, and it functioned very differently than it does in the broad range of contemporary music today. So if you're interested in this, there are 2 books that I've listed here that are really, really great books. And 不管你是学音乐的或者学其他的，都是非常非常有意思的。然后就是跟我们西方的音乐这个有很大的关系。Okay, so the first one is Clive Brown's Classical and Romantic Performing Practice. Especially the 4th chapter talks about this a lot, 第4章. And another wonderful book is by Hahnencourt and Baroque Music Today, Music as Speech, Ways to a New Understanding of Music. I'd highly recommend both of these books. Another cool example that I wanted to talk about in terms of relationships between language and music is the concept of using instruments to imitate speech, to imitate talking. 用乐器来模仿语言。So I've split this into 2 categories, 声调语言以及非声调语言. So tonal languages and non-tonal languages. For non-tonal languages, a really cool example is by the Austrian composer Peter Ablinger, and he is using only a piano to imitate a child speaking. He used a recording of a child's voice, and then he transferred this to the piano. Okay, 现在给大家放一下这个说话的钢琴。是不是很有意思？这个是完全是钢琴来做的。It's completely piano. There's no human voice in that, and yet it seems like someone is talking. We also have lots of examples in 声调语言, in tonal languages. So one example is whistled speech. When people whistle, I can't really whistle, but to imitate their speech. And in tonal languages, sometimes we get people doing this, and they can communicate only by whistling. 就是用口哨这个就是来沟通啊，就是没有词，然后没有真正的声调，但是大家还能听懂。 非常有趣的一个现象。And there are also many examples in African cultures of really cool instruments that imitate talking. There is the West African talking drum, there is the Congo lokale log, and all of these 模仿就是声调和说话。And as we'll talk more about coming up, there are lots of really cool examples in Chinese music as well. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about the role of pitch in Chinese versus the role of pitch in English, and the differences between them and also the connections. So first, a little disclaimer, what we mean by Chinese, what is Chinese, because everyone knows, okay, China has 56个少数民族，然后300多方言, so 56 ethnic minorities, over 300 different languages total, including regional dialects. Which among these counts as Chinese? So today what we're talking about is going to be Standard Mandarin, 普通话, and a little bit also of 广东话, Cantonese. Okay, so pitch is important in all human languages, and I think that's easy to understand if you don't have any pitch differences. For instance, if I were to speak like this, I would kind of sound like an alien or a weird person. 所以音高的区别就是非常相当重要的一个东西来沟通。So first looking at how pitch functions in English. English is not a tonal language, right? 没有声调，但是还是非常 crucial. It's very, very important. 举个例子吧，看这两句话 Tony likes chocolate 和 Tony likes chocolate 到底有什么区别呢？ What's the difference? Tony likes chocolate. Tony likes chocolate. 大家跟我一起试试吧。Tony likes chocolate 第一个和 Tony likes chocolate. Okay, so the difference is, if you were to ask me something like, Who likes chocolate? 谁喜欢巧克力呢？我可以回答他喜欢 Tony likes chocolate. And you can see on your screen on the left side, see the blue line? That's the pitch, the highest part of the sentence. Tony likes chocolate. 就是他喜欢巧克力。第二句呢 Tony likes chocolate. If you ask me, what flavor does Tony like? Or what kind of ice cream does Tony like? 他喜欢什么味道? I could respond, Tony likes chocolate. Okay, so here on the lower right of your screen, the highest part is on chocolate. You see the red arrow pointing to the blue line? That's where the pitch is highest. So try it one more time and see if you can notice the difference. 谁喜欢巧克力呢？他喜欢巧克力 Tony likes chocolate. Tony 喜欢什么味道？ Tony likes chocolate. Okay, so 很微妙的区别，但是还是很重要的。A subtle difference, but still very important. So now looking at pitch in Chinese, this is a little bit more complicated, because we have not only 语调, not only inflections and everything, but also lexical tones, 声调。这个美国人学汉语的时候给我们带来一个很大的一个困难。So it's hard for many Westerners to understand the differences between the tones and memorizing them and using them in all of their speech. So for our Chinese friends watching, obviously the pitch contours of Mandarin tones is something you learn from a very young age. And for our American friends watching, you can see on the diagram here, the 4 pitch contours of Mandarin tones are ma, 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 ma. 这个大家都很熟的。Okay, so if you say the same syllable with these 4 different tones, it has a completely different meaning. what this means is that there is a much closer relationship between musical pitch and linguistic pitch in Chinese. So there are so many examples, and we don't have time to go through all of them today, but I wanted to give a couple that I find really cool as a Westerner. The first one is the calls of merchants on the street, okay, 吆喝声. And this is something 在老北京或者老上海之前曾经有，但现在基本上就听不到了。Mostly it doesn't really, you won't hear it anymore in society, but it was an old tradition in especially, old Beijing and old Shanghai. You could hear these beautiful melodies of people selling things. And I'll play an example of 其实我前天在北京，然后我司机给我听这个，他给我唱这个，我现在来放一下这个吆喝声的例子。
香菜马青椒哎，屋里那些黄瓜扁豆夹中国买大海，买萝卜胡萝卜嫩芽儿嘞，香椿儿嘞叶儿嘞好。
是不是很有意思? This is an example from my taxi driver in Beijing 2 days ago, and he is a 老北京人，所以地地道道的北京人, very authentic Beijing person, and he gave me an example of a melody that you would used to hear back on the streets, and that was of a merchant selling fresh vegetables. And the melody is completely determined by the tones. Okay. Another really interesting example is the types of variations that we can see in a folk song, depending on where it's being sung. Okay, so 一个那个很有名的一个例子就是绣荷包。This is a famous example in Chinese literature of a folk song that changes. So depending on if it's sung in the north or in the south or in the east or in the west, the melody, the ornaments, the rhythms, even the lyrics will all have 微妙的改变，微妙的区别，都是因为不同泛言，就是不同泛言的自己的声调什么的。Another example, very similar to this, is Chinese opera, 中国的戏曲, Chinese opera, Chinese theater, and the type most familiar to Americans and Westerners in general is 京剧, Peking opera, Beijing opera. And again, we find lots of differences in the types of intervals used, 音程, the types of melodies used, 旋律, types of rhythms used, 节奏, 都是因为语言不同，都是因为有不同的方言什么的。So this is a very important difference. Another cool example is perhaps you have heard of 女书，这是湖南的一个语言。女书这个 is a language from Hunan province, and this is a language that was invented by the women of the region to have their own sort of secret communication system. And the really cool thing about this language is that it is sung. When you read it, you sing it. So can you imagine English speakers inventing a language like that where you had to sing the language? 这个大概不可能的. So this is a very interesting, I think, consequence of a language having tones and the way that we think about music and the way that we think about sound. Okay, so now I want to use this sort of awareness and this sensitivity to look at a specific piece. And the piece that I've chosen is a piece for unaccompanied violin by the composer Chen Yi called Memory, 回忆. A little bit of background about Chen老师. She's a wonderful contemporary Chinese and Chinese American composer based in America now, and she's, as you can see on this PowerPoint, won many important international prizes, lots of recognition for her works. She graduated with her doctorate from Columbia, studying with wonderful teachers there. And I think she's found a really wonderful way of combining 西方音乐和中国音乐, combining Western and Chinese aesthetics and styles and traditions to really form her own language, her own way of writing. Okay, so the reason that I have chosen this piece, 回忆, this piece, memory, is because it is really the first piece of Chinese music that I ever learned. And it's really special to me, and I love it, and I want to share it with more people. So I hope that you guys will be excited to learn about it. Okay, so this piece was written in 2010, and it was dedicated to Chen Yi's violin teacher who had just passed away, Lin Yaoji, Lin Lao Shi. So it's a memorial to him. And the really cool thing is that it's using the tones of his name, Lin Lao Shi, to create the melody. However, the really important difference is it's not using Mandarin, it's using 广东话, using Cantonese. 为什么呢？主要是因为 the cultural background, right? Chen Yi is from Guangzhou. She had a shared cultural heritage with Lin Lao Shi, with Cantonese. Also, Cantonese has more tones than Mandarin, 对吧？广东话有9个声调，可以说，然后这个给你带来更多的选择来创造的时候，来写曲子。So more compositional choices because Cantonese has more tones. I think that's very interesting. Okay, so looking now at how we arrive at the melody for this piece. 我首先来放一下这个陈老师唱的林老师用广东话来唱。林老师，我自己一点都不会广东话。林老师林老师，所以他唱的就是when she's singing it, you can feel it's very passionate, she's grieving for him, and it has a wonderful, beautiful melody. So then what she does with this is she turns it into the 主旋律, she turns it into the main melody. So if you can read music, look at the example on the right side of your screen. If you can't read music, I'm going to play it for you. So you remember what she just sung? Is 是不是很像？完全是跟着这个就是 lam lo si 这个说法，它的那个旋律和声调什么的。Okay, so the melody is completely from her reciting his name in Cantonese. So now I have a few diagrams of the piece, and if you don't know how to read music, it's okay, it's totally fine. I'm going to play all of these for you so you can listen. But I just wanted you to see how many times we have lam lo si, and we have it in different forms. Okay? So we have it right away at the beginning, as I just played. And we have it in many other versions too. Can you hear the similarities? That one is more drawn out, it's more exaggerated. But you can still see, if you're looking at the diagram now, it's still based on lam lo si, just dragged out and more painful, more mourning. Yeah, lots more examples. And in a moment I'll play the whole piece for you, and it'll be interesting to see if you can pick out each one and recognize it. So now this is memory, the whole thing. by Chen Yi, and the music is on the screen if you'd like to follow along. If not, feel free to listen and enjoy. So to me, one of the reasons this piece is so powerful is because you really can hear someone talking, you really can hear someone crying, someone grieving, and going through the whole process. The part in the middle with the 非常不和谐的那个地方，你可能一开始会觉得有点难听啊，这个不合唱，那个 the harmony it's very dissonant. But why she uses these dissonances is because her teacher has died and she's really sad. So when we experience this pain, this is a wonderful way of representing that feeling that we have. So I think it's a masterful way of using language to communicate in music the various emotions and stages of grief that she's going through. Okay, so today I've given everyone a little bit of background about music and language relationships, and we've looked at how music and language can help each other and influence each other, and it doesn't matter if you're learning Chinese or if you're learning English, you can always use your music to help you, and you can use your language studies to help your music. And this kind of thinking, I believe it makes us more sensitive. I believe it makes us more aware and more proactive. It doesn't matter if you are professional or audience member or just listening to something on the computer. It's always good to challenge the way that we hear and challenge ourselves how we listen to things. And this is not only relevant with Chinese, but also with other languages. 我推荐学音乐的同学，比如说，如果你再学一首法国曲子，you can learn a little bit of French and see how the French language is 影响到这首曲子。So lots of possibilities, lots of different ways to combine things and explore. So that is the end of my talk today, and I see a lot of comments saying I feel very sad and this music was very sad, and so because of that I'm going to play one more piece that is happy, okay, because I don't want people to be sad. So 这个其实跟我刚才讲的没有具体的关系，就是给大家分享一下 ，OK， 这个是一首巴赫的曲子。OK， 谢谢大家。
会记这些东西，谁会记啊？